What if we told you that Porky's wasn't just a wild teen sex comedy but a film based on true events? Shady bar owners and real-life swamp raids? That behind-the-crude jokes and steamy locker room scenes was a movie that redefined an entire genre. Dive into the madness behind Porky's, from band scenes and fake palm trees to X-rated cuts and video games. You won't believe what went down behind the camera. Hit that like, subscribe, and prepare for 20 facts that'll blow your mind. Bob Clark, the director, co-writer, and co-producer of Porky's, based the script on his own teenage years growing up in 1950s Florida. From sneaking into bars to elaborate pranks gone wrong, everything in the movie came from real experiences. In fact, the titular character Porky was inspired by a real bar owner named Porky Williams, who reportedly allowed underage kids into his establishment, kept a lion in a cage, and was surrounded by mysterious rumors. Tragically, Porky Williams died by suicide in 1972, 5 years after his bar shut down. Despite being soaked in southern heat and Florida vibes, Porky's was actually filmed in Canada. A decision made for tax break purposes, the filmmakers transformed chilly Canadian locations to resemble swamps and dive bars in the Sunshine State. Extras shivered through scenes while pretending it was sweltering outside. That dedication paid off. The film cost only about $4 to $5 million to make, and grossed more than $160 million worldwide, making it not only a major hit in the United States, but also the highest-grossing Canadian film at the time. It held that title for 24 years, until it was dethroned in 2006 by Bon Cop, Bad Cop, and later by Resident Evil: Afterlife in 2010. What's even more surprising is that 20th Century Fox, the distributor, almost refused to release the film. Executives found the humor too crude, the concept too wild, and the story too unpredictable. But everything changed after test screenings. Teenagers were roaring with laughter, quoting lines, and lining up to buy tickets. One studio executive even admitted, "We didn't get it. The audience did," and just like that, Porky's went from forgotten shelf material to a full-blown box office juggernaut. However, the film's road to release wasn't smooth. The MPAA originally gave Porky's an X rating, which would have severely limited its release and profitability. The filmmakers were forced to cut scenes and modify some of the more explicit dialogue to secure an R rating. Even then, the controversy didn't stop. The film was banned in Ireland for nearly 3 weeks, but once the ban was lifted, Irish audiences flocked to theaters in droves, and the film performed incredibly well. One of the biggest criticisms and most iconic scenes came from the infamous girls' locker room prank. The scene caused public outcry and was edited or banned in several TV broadcasts. Critics claimed it went too far, while Bob Clark defended it as satirical, saying it was meant to mock adolescent immaturity rather than glorify it. Regardless of the debate, the scene became one of the most memorable in teen comedy history. The cast of Porky's added to the film's absurd charm, despite the story focusing on high schoolers. Nearly all the actors were far beyond their teen years. Dan Monahan, who played the ever-horny Pee-wee, was 26 at the time. Mark Harrier, who portrayed Billy, was 27, and Scott Colombier, K. O'Brien, was a whopping 29. By the time Porky's Revenge hit screens in 1985, Colombi was 32, still playing a high schooler. This wasn't a unique situation either. Other teen classics like Grease, The Karate Kid, and The Amazing Spider-Man also featured actors well into adulthood portraying teenagers. And then there was Kim Cattrall, years before she played Samantha Jones on Sex and the City. In Porky's, she played a high school coach known affectionately and hysterically as Lassie, a nickname tied to one of the film's most absurd and unforgettable scenes. Her performance helped launch her into the comedy spotlight, leading to roles in Police Academy and eventually solidifying her place as a pop culture icon. Interestingly, the role of Porky Williams wasn't originally intended for an actor. The first choice was a real-life sheriff deputy from Broward County, Florida, named Don Liddon, but he was ultimately passed over for not being physically large enough. The role went to Chuck Mitchell, whose larger-than-life presence embodied the villainous bar owner perfectly. Mitchell would go on to appear in other comedies, often playing characters with a similar sleazy edge, despite the crude humor. Bob Clark insisted there was a deeper message underneath all the madness. Porky's, he said, was about teenage insecurity, the desperate, often foolish attempt by boys to act like grown men without really knowing what that meant. Beneath the nudity and pranks was a story about growing up, fitting in, and the awkward mess of adolescence. The success of Porky's paved the way for a wave of similar films throughout the 80s and 2000s, From Revenge of the Nerds to American Pie, these films borrowed the same formula: awkward guys, ridiculous situations, and no-holds-barred humor. Porky's essentially invented the modern gross-out teen comedy and changed the genre's trajectory forever. But the film's popularity wasn't just confined to theaters. It spawned merchandise, spin-offs, and even a video game. In 1983, Atari released a Porky's game for the 2600 console, where players navigated Pee-wee across swamps and highways, building ladders and pole vaulting to destroy the infamous bar. The game was pulled from shelves shortly after release for being too risque, but collectors today are willing to pay serious cash for original copies. Even more baffling, there was a novelization of the movie. That's right, someone decided that Porky's needed to be immortalized in book form. It's not exactly the Great Gatsby, but hey, it exists. The Porky's phenomenon didn't end with the original film. It was followed by the sequels Porky's 2, The Next Day in 1983 and Porky's Revenge in 1985. Though they tried to maintain the outrageous humor, they didn't capture the same magic and were largely panned by critics. Still, the original retained its cult status and continues to attract new fans decades later. The attempt to revive the franchise in the 2000s brought Howard Stern into the picture. In 2002, the shock jock acquired the rights to Porky's with plans for a modern reboot that would preserve the spirit of the original while updating the humor. Bob Clark gave the project his blessing, but after his tragic death in 2007, the reboot fell apart. Legal battles over rights ownership further complicated things, and eventually, the idea was shelved. That didn't stop others from trying. In 2008, a company called Lontano Investments released a bizarre low-budget film titled Porky's Pimpin' Pee-wee. The movie had almost nothing in common with the original aside from the name and was made largely to maintain the legal rights to the franchise. It received a tiny release and disappeared quickly. Still, Porky's remained part of pop culture. One cast member shared a story about receiving prank calls from fans quoting lines from the movie. It was in that moment, he said, that he realized the film had become something bigger than anyone expected, a cultural touchstone for a generation. But perhaps the most unexpected legacy of Porky's is that it helped make a Christmas story a reality. After the success of Porky's, 20th Century Fox was desperate for a sequel and wanted Bob Clark to direct. Clark agreed on one condition: he also wanted to make a heartfelt, family-friendly holiday movie based on his own memories. That film was A Christmas Story, and Fox allowed it, hoping the next Porky's installment would fund another hit. Ironically, while Porky's 2 made more money at the box office, A Christmas Story went on to become a timeless Christmas classic beloved by millions. Whether you love it or cringe at it, Porky's remains a bold, unforgettable chapter in movie history. It broke rules, sparked laughs, and left a legacy that still echoes today. Some films polish perfection. Porky's embraced the chaos. Like, share, and subscribe if you love wild stories from behind the scenes, and drop your favorite Porky's moment below. Thanks for watching.